And just one quick note, Gerald. Just before you introduce Raye, there'll be a 1-second delay while I run from the podium and turn on your camera, and then I'll give you a thumbs up when you start your introduction.
Okay. For the 1 second. What's that about, Gerald?
And of course, I am.
And of course, I'm the one person who not only did not turn on his microphone, but also left his cell phone on.
Oh, I saw his mine.
Oh, darn it. Well,
Good evening, everyone. My name is John Taves, and I'm the event coordinator here at McNally Robinson Booksellers. Before we begin, I would like to make note of the fact that McNally Robinson is located in Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. In addition, McNally Robinson Booksellers itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Roostertown. We're delighted that you could join us here tonight on this beautiful May evening, both here in person and virtually. So hello to all those watching on YouTube. Luckily, through the wonders of modern technology, everyone will be able to participate in this event, and I'll be able to tell you a little bit more about that in just a moment. I'm also keenly aware that housekeeping notes are the least engaging part of any event, so I'll thank you in advance for your forbearance before we move along to the infinitely more interesting conversation and reading at the heart of tonight. I'd like to begin by expressing my great thanks to Signature Editions for both publishing this book and for helping to make this event a reality. We've been looking forward to celebrating Raye's work for quite some time, so it's delightful to have her and your host, whom I'll be introducing in just a moment, here in the space. Just a few quick notes about the way the event is going to go. While we're in this event space, we just very politely ask that you all just keep your masks on. Once we actually leave the space for the signing, at that point, they'll no longer be required, although they will be recommended. You will notice that all the speakers will remove theirs when they are behind the microphone. There will be time for a Q&A as well, following the reading and conversation. At that point, just to ensure that everyone can hear you, and because it still seems a little bit unwise for everybody to be sharing the same microphone, I'll just ask you to ask me the question, which I will then put to Raye. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can also write your questions in the chat, and we'll make sure that we put them to her. As I cannot possibly do justice to the inevitable eloquence of your words, I would ask that you restrict your question to a question, as you'll have ample time to offer any lovely comments you might have to Raye when you meet her at the signing table immediately after the event. With that in mind, I will be back at the end to go over how the signing will go. The only thing I will put as a seed in your mind right now is that we will ask you to remain seated for just a moment while we transport Raye to the signing table beside the cash desk, as that'll give her time to get settled so that she may welcome you all. Thank you all very much for the indulgence. But we are here, of course, to celebrate Down Came the Rain, which is the third Roxanne Calloway mystery by Raye Anderson. Here to speak with Raye is your host for the evening, Gerald Brown. Gerald was the chief librarian for the Winnipeg School Division for many years. After retiring from the Winnipeg School Division, he took on consulting work for the World Bank, which took him to 49 countries around the world. He is now the library program coordinator at Lyons Place, Winnipeg. Please join me in welcoming Gerald Brown.
You're up. Thanks, Mr. Taves. Welcome, folks, to this party. I'm sure it's going to be quite a party when our author gets herself all wound up. Our author today has quite a history behind her. If you chat with her for a little while, you'll soon discover that she has a lovely, lilting Scottish accent in her voice. She immigrated to Canada in 1972 and hasn't lost any of it. Now check it a little deeper and you'll find out that she spent a lot of time in the theater here and elsewhere too, running theater schools here in Winnipeg, especially at Prairie Theatre Exchange, working in Calgary, in Ottawa, as far north as Churchill and Yellowknife, and coast to coast across Canada. I first heard about her when she was working with PTE and Winnipeg School Division in a residence program where they taught students how to do improvisation. Can you imagine working with a gang of teenagers and getting them to do improvisations? The kids loved it. Those were such good days. She lives in Gimli now and is an active participant in the Interlake artists and writing community. You'll get to know that soon when you start reading her books. They are set in the Interlake. I wonder how many of the characters are composites of actual persons she has known directly in the area. You might even see yourself in some of her stories. They all sound very familiar to anyone who's ever lived in a rural community. I'm sure you will recognize some of the landmarks she uses too. Are you curious at all about Major Crimes Unit of RCMP? Some people are, and these novels will give you a fresh insight into the activities through Roxanne Calloway, the heroine, and her colleagues, and the locals. Her first book, And We Shall Have Snow. How could you choose a title that for Manitoba, eh? And We Shall Have Snow 2020 will take you on a delightful winter romp to discover the murderer without getting frostbitten. It was shortlisted for the Crime Writers of Canada Award for the best first crime novel. It was also shortlisted for the Willa Award for original softcover fiction. We at Lyons Place had the pleasure to enjoy tonight's author on October 2021 at our monthly Visiting Authors and Artists series. Once more, the writing bug caught her, or it has just kept infecting her, and it wasn't long until, and then is heard no more. Just the title is a mystery, isn't it? And then is heard no more. Rumor has it that this one will be the Winnipeg Free Press Book Club selection for July and August this year. If you'd like a taste of the theater mysteries here in Winnipeg, this is the right place for you. It's set right here in Manitoba. Don't miss the title. Does it pique your literary imagination just a little? And then is heard no more. Where did it come from? And now today, and now down came the rain, 2022. Little did she know that there was going to be so much rain around here when she brought this book out. Roxanne and her team are certainly challenged by the 3 murders in this novel. Did you get that? 3 of them. And you'll stay up until you find out who the 3rd one is. She will keep you reading until late at night. This chapter leaves you wanting to rush on to the next, regardless of what the clock says. Major crime units, more weather issues, more interlake settings. Have you ever heard of Fiskar Bay? That you won't be able to resist. She has an amazing cast of characters to challenge your detective skills too. It's my pleasure tonight to introduce our author, Roxanne Calloway. Oh, I'm sorry, Calloway. And it's not really Roxanne, is it? It's Raye Anderson. Raye, will you please come to the microphone and tell us a little bit about the reading that you'd like to give to us or share with us?
All right, and I'm just going to go over there. Because I like to stand up when I'm reading. This 3rd book takes Roxanne Calloway to Fiskar Bay. Fiskar Bay bears a strong resemblance to a certain town in the Interlake that has a lot of Icelanders and has a Ukrainian community around it. And I just happen to live there now, right? Roxanne, in the last book, got herself into a bit of a predicament. And she decided that it would be better to get a safer job. So she has opted for becoming the staff sergeant at the Fiskar Bay detachment of the RCMP. So she has left the major crime units, so she's not dealing with murderers and the like. But unfortunately, the first body that shows up in the middle of a spring melt lying in a frozen ditch is that of her predecessor. and it becomes clear that the police in Fiskar Bay are in grave danger. So I was walking along by the harbour just last week, and right now it's launch season, so it's kind of launch and launch, right? They're launching all the boats, and there is a chapter here where there is a lot of boat launching going on, and I thought it would be great to do that, but there's a big spoiler in it. So instead, I'm going to read you another one that involves the harbour and involves Roxanne. So Roxanne is out investigating a possible suspect, and a storm has arisen. She knows that, and there's also another character called Izzy McBain, and if any of you have read the books, she's kind of her sidekick in the Major Crimes Unit in the first 2 books. And Izzy is the person who's investigating these murders on behalf of the Major Crimes Unit, so she figures in this too. There's also a young constable called Amy Vermette, who is just working the desk at the detachment. So, fat raindrops spattered against Roxanne's windshield as she drove past Desna Church and the Cleric Farm. The sun had vanished into a growing mass of ominous clouds. A bolt of lightning lit the sky, followed by a crack of thunder. It rumbled on as she reached the corner of Cleric Road. She saw a few bouquets on the ground, the plastic mounties standing at attention, the wooden cross propped up once more. They were going to get battered by this coming rain. It was already getting heavier. There was another flash of light, and this time the thunder followed more quickly. The storm was getting closer fast. She looked round through the rain in the direction of the Mackenzie farmhouse and saw a light at a window. Someone was there. She shouldn't go banging on the door alone, she told herself, not when she had insisted that her team should only investigate in pairs. But she could drive by and see if a car was in the driveway. The sky became dark, the gloom broken by an occasional flicker of lightning. The rain sheeted down, making it hard for her to see. She slowed the car to a crawl. The house sat on a corner. Light forked across the sky and illuminated the scene enough for her to see a hatchback parked in the driveway. She crept past it, wishing she could turn on her headlights, but trying not to attract attention, glad that the noise of the storm would mask the sound of her car engine. On the north side, a stand of spruce trees sheltered the house. She reached the next corner, turned the car around, then drove back and stopped behind them. The rain battered down, but she could just see the light shining from a window. Someone was moving around inside. Her phone buzzed. She took the call, still watching to see if she could identify the shadowy person inside. Gerald Gilchrist just called, Amy reported. Izzy and her daughter Hazel went out in a boat. Now it's storming, and they haven't made it back. She hasn't heard from them, and she wondered if Izzy had been in touch. I got a text earlier saying they'd gone out. Call the harbour master and find out if they've docked there. Maybe we should alert the Coast Guard. I'll try, said Amy, but the power's out in town. I'm on my way back. I'll go straight to the harbour and check it out. The rain was still teeming down when she reached Fiskar Bay. No one roamed the street or drove their cars in this deluge except her. Houses were lit within, some by flickering candles. The town's residents were tucked safely inside while the storm gathered force. The lights were on at the hospital. It had a generator. Ambulances stood in their bays, ready if needed. She glanced along the side road to the RCMP detachment as she passed by. Lights glowed through the gloom. It had a generator too. Roxanne's wipers were making hard work of it. She would normally pull over in a torrent like this and wait for the thunderclouds to pass, but she drove steadily on down the street. She didn't have far to go now. A brilliant flash cracked its way across the sky. The thunder was incessant. The rain pounded down on the roof of her car as the strength of the storm continued to mount. Roxanne hoped Izzy and Hazel Gilchrist were somewhere safe off the water. When she reached the lakeshore, she could see waves whipped up by the wind crashing high enough to surge over the top of the seawall, built thick and strong to stand up to weather like this. She crawled the car along the quay and parked it beside the harbour master's office. It was in darkness. She pushed her car door open and ran through the downpour. It didn't take much. She tried the door, it was locked. The Coast Guard station sat nearby beside a slipway down into the water of the harbour. A light shone through sheets of rain from above the doorway. They must have a power source too, but no one answered when she hammered on the door. She scurried back to the car, grateful to get under cover, rubbed the rainwater from her face and called Izzy's number again. Still no answer. Amy answered her next call. She hadn't heard from Izzy either. She'd left a message from the harbour master, but he hadn't got back to her. Do you know what the Gilchrist boat looks like? Roxanne asked. Amy did. She'd seen it last summer. The hull was blue and it was called the Julie Ann. Roxanne decided she'd check the boats in the harbour before she raised the alarm. There weren't many this early in the year. It wouldn't take long. Maybe the Julie Ann was rocking at its berth. And Hazel and Izzy were somewhere safe, but still she was worried. Wouldn't Izzy have had the sense to let people know she was okay? The rain still poured down. The next lightning flash was straight overhead. The storm would soon move out over the lake. The waves crashed louder and higher. She jogged past the wharf where the fishing yawls were moored and out onto the next one where some motorboats were docked. Wooden slats clattered under her feet. She concentrated on keeping to the center of the walkway, maintaining her balance as she read the name on each prow. There was no Julianne. She picked her way back carefully. She was soaked and glad to get back onto firm ground. A wind had picked up. Rain battered her face. A few more boats of varying sizes were moored along the jetty that lined the seawall. She should go check them out. Roxanne was still on the quay when she saw car lights coming from the town toward her. Someone else had ventured out in the storm. Two roads approached the harbour, one at each end. One led straight to the seawall. The vehicle was driving down it fast, given the conditions. She expected it to slow. It didn't. It was coming toward her, and it didn't reduce its speed. She realized it was coming straight for her. She turned and ran out along the concrete jetty away from the incoming lights. The car wasn't slowing, it was accelerating. The seawall formed a solid barricade on her left. The jetty ran ahead in a sweeping curve wide enough to take a vehicle. Roxanne raced on against the wind, feet slapping through puddles, rain blinding her. The driver behind her wasn't slowing down. The car lights shone through the streaming rain. Her moving shadow elongated as the vehicle closed in on her. She could almost hear the engine through the raindrops battering the pavement, the waves crashing over the top of the seawall. She turned abruptly to her right. 2 steps took her to the side of the jetty. She put one foot onto the low barricade that edged it, pushed off, and jumped. So we leave Roxanne in the harbour water, which is freezing cold, and we'll see what happens after.
Doesn't that make you really want to find out what happened to Roxanne? Yes, it's wonderful. She has such a wonderful talent with words. I'm so delighted to have shared this story. Now it's your turn to ask questions. Who'd like to start? Where's John? He's going to take the questions. Any questions? No questions. Don't you want to know about those bodies? Who of these people was involved in Major Crimes Unit? What foreshadowing did she give us? It's all there. Well, after she had spoken at our place, our people asked a variety of questions too. And so from that, I devised a few more questions to help you elaborate. Like, for example, how did you decide to develop the character of Roxanne, and what kind of a sleuth really is she? No, she's an RCMP.
Well, Roxanne, you know, I find the whole business of the sleuths really interesting, and the fact that they tend to dominate the genre, you know, that they become books about the sleuths, but in fact, quite often the book is about the community that the story is based in, and really the sleuth. So I wanted the sleuth really to be a vehicle for that story rather than dominating it. So I wasn't really interested in having the kind of sleuth who is the superhero. So I didn't want her to be one of those extremely brilliant people that, just intuits who the murderer is. I wanted her to just be a real cop. So I based her a lot on cops I've known. I grew up with some cops. So, and all of them thought of themselves as good people, and all of them thought of themselves as trying to do a good job and trying to kind of find out what was wrong and trying to fix things. And I wanted to make sure that she was that kind of sleuth. So I wanted her to be the kind of investigator who would go in and ask questions, and by asking questions would cause things to happen. Because I really do think that in crime fiction, it's got to be a very action-driven plot. So, so her function in the book really is as much to cause things to be uncovered and to cause things to occur as it is to actually solve the murder. And in fact, in some of these books, she doesn't solve the murder. In some of them, she just kind of trips up on who the murderer is, almost because they almost reveal themselves, because basically she flushes them out.
And she uses the local community often as a vehicle for doing that, doesn't she?
Well, the local community kind of sometimes works against her, right? Because they're busy trying to figure out who it is too, and sometimes they kind of get in the way. They sometimes it becomes who's going to find out first, and sometimes they get themselves into some predicaments too that she then has to deal with. But yeah, I think murder mysteries are interesting, just interesting reflections of what goes on inside a community.
So that's why you think murder mysteries or crime mysteries are so popular now?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I read crime fiction all my life, and I think crime fiction is something we kind of need. I think crime fiction is kind of like a modern day fairy tale. I think in a way they give you an insight into what a community is, and then something goes terribly wrong and people get into all kinds of trouble that may or may not be of their own doing, but then someone comes along and fixes it and it all ends up okay. So it's that part, that you end up, you have somewhere that is safe and okay, and then everything goes wrong and everything spirals out of control, and then everything becomes okay because someone fixes it. And so there's always this promise in a crime fiction novel that by the end someone will solve it. And that's the fairy tale piece, right? And I think in a world where things are going wrong, sometimes we just need that. The stories we hear. So I think that's why they're so popular.
So who are some of the authors you read when you were a youngin'?
Oh boy. I'm Scottish, right? And there's a huge, it's really interesting. There's this huge Scottish crime fiction thing. And I think I'm very much of that genre. I'm of that ilk. And I think something that's common in the Scottish crime writing field is a sense of characters who are dual in their nature, that they're good and bad. So we're not dealing with, I'm not interested in crime fiction where there's a monster. I'm not interested in the psychopath. I'm not interested in the crime fiction that says that there's just somebody really, really bad out there that you have to get. I'm really interested in situations that cause people to do something really bad inadvertently, or just that bring out the worst in people, but also bring out the best in people. And when you look at Scottish writing, it's right there. It's right there in Robert Louis Stevenson, and it's right in there in the books that we read as kids. It's right there in the Underland fairy tales. It's right there in it's right there in Walter Scott, really. It's but when you take it right to Jekyll and Hyde, right, then you've got that sense of duality right there. And I think that's just inherent in the kind of writing that I do and that writers like me write.
Now, you said that you had some experience with the cops. I hope that wasn't a speeding ticket with your new car. Is it true that this signature company pays such high royalties that you can now afford a new car?
Ha ha ha.
Well, you've had some experience with the cops along the way. So how did you learn so much about the RCMP? Because they're a very quiet, closed.
Oh, that was hard, actually. Finding out about the RCMP was difficult. I knew a bit about the police because my grandfather was a policeman and my brother-in-law was a DI in the UK, and my nephew is with the London Metropolitan Police, and so I kind of grew up with that. But the RCMP is structured differently, and to write about crime fiction, you've got to be accurate on it. And finding people that would tell me how they operated was difficult. But I was really lucky in that Andrew Minor, who is ex-RCMP and who is now the executive director of the Manitoba Police Federation. Anyway, he's been really helpful. He's been fantastic. So Andrew tells me what the structures are and how it all operates, and he filled me in a lot right at the beginning. When I first started, Roxanne was a detective inspector, right? And he said, no, you can't do that. He said, if she was an inspector, she'd be behind a desk. There's no way she'd be out there doing it. And he said, and we don't have detectives in the RCMP. They don't use the word. They expect that any member of the RCMP should be able to do it all and should be able to act as an investigator as well as all the other kind of functions that the police carry out. So the idea that someone should be signified a detective just doesn't happen. So I had to change all that. So he was really helpful.
Do you think we could say that she's a little bit of a sleuth herself?
Well, you have to do research. I mean, you really, you've got to do the research to be able to do all this. And it's really interesting where you choose to go in terms of research. I know lots of, it's a very changing field, investigation, police procedurals, and I didn't intend to write police procedurals, although I've kind of got myself there.
So how many of the other characters?
Forensics have become huge, right? So now the ways in which they can investigate, for instance, they don't use poisons anymore. Murderers don't poison anymore because basically they're going to get tracked so darn fast that someone's going to know what it is that's being used and find them fairly quickly. So whereas back in Agatha Christie's day, she knew all about poisons because she'd had a career. I can't remember what the career was, but she'd been involved in investigating poisons, and so she used poison a lot. And I just don't use poison at all. And what they can tell from a body and what they can tell about what has happened to a body and what has impacted the body is just amazing. And it is changing almost monthly. So keeping up to date with that is huge. So I tend to kind of just play at the edge of that. I'm no authority on decomposing.
Now, what about all of these other characters that you have in there? How many of them did you know? How many of them are real people? Like in one of the books, there's 50 characters.
None of them are real people. Seriously, I mean, they start off with maybe there's maybe one thing about them that I use, something that I've seen someone do or something I've heard someone say, but they very quickly kind of become their own characters. They really do invent themselves. I think partly because my background's drama, and so improvising is kind of second nature, and so it's quite easy to kind of create a character in my head and improvise it. And once I've got the voice of a character, it's really easy to work with that character. I mean, Issy McBain, I know exactly how she acts, I know exactly what she says, but I do not know a person who's like Issy McBain. And so the characters quite often start as a germ of an idea or a function, and then but they morph into somebody else. None of them, absolutely none of them are exactly like anybody I know.
Now, that's just a way of getting out of a law court, a lawsuit. So somebody says,
No,
she picked
seriously.
on me and that
No,
one.
seriously. They're not. They're all mental characters.
Now, Roxanne, I mean, Ray.
And there is no way I'm Roxanne. I'm not. Some people have thought I'm kind of like Margot. I've been accused of being Margot more often than Roxanne.
Well, you'll get Margot in all 3 books.
And Margot's in all 3 books. Yeah.
So you might meet up with character like her.
But Margot's also not. Margot's not me. Margot's somebody else. Margot's become somebody else.
Yes. Just take your mask down and shout it at me.
How did you get started writing?
How did you get started writing?
How did I get started? Well, I got started. I went out into Lake, having done drama all my life, and having written a lot. I mean, I used to write plays with kids and stuff like that. And I ended up doing a lot of visual art, because that's what everybody out in Italy does, right? We all draw and paint. And I did the wave tour and all that stuff, and I did that for years. And Dot did art out there too. And so did Nancy. Nancy did art out there. And Nancy and I got together one day. Nancy Hall out there. Hiya. Nancy was my first writing buddy. So Nancy and I would get together. We decided that we should both be writing instead of doing visual art. And we decided to get together once every 3 weeks and do a writing exercise. And read it to each other and talk and just see where it led us, right? No idea. And we did it for probably a year and a half. Yeah. And then one day the challenge was to write something in a style of something we enjoyed reading a lot. And I got stuck. And so about week 2 of that 3 weeks phase, I suddenly looked at my desk and went, oh, I've got an awful lot of murder mysteries sitting there. So maybe I should have a go at that. And over the next 3 or 4 days, what I wrote was the first chapter of And We Shall Sow. And the minute I wrote it, I knew I was going to keep going. I knew I'd hit something that really worked for me. And I haven't stopped.
So, Ray, how about this transition from theater to writing? What's the similarities? What's the differences? How do you appreciate one differently from the other?
Well, it's interesting in that theater's a very collaborative form, right? You're always working with other people. Everything that you write is reinterpreted, and a director is going to change it, an actor is going to change it. But also when you're writing stuff with kids and working collectively, which is what I did a lot of, you're pulling in other ideas and you're creating stories. I taught creative drama every morning for about 20 years with bunches of kids, right? And you're making up stories all the time. So it's in a way, it's an improvised storytelling. And this is a genre that's totally rooted in storytelling. So, and I did building character and in dialogue and all of those things that are things that you're working with when you're actually working in drama. It's got, crime fiction has a real kind of dramatic curve to it. It's got that kind of, you build, there's crisis and it falls off. And in these books, I tend to kind of end up with about 5 of them that are all kind of just 5 threads that are running. But they're all very, very much based on that dramatic model. I think it's a very dramatic form of writing. So it was interesting that when I moved out to the Interlake, instead of working collaboratively, I started working individually. And so starting creating art by myself was starting to do stuff all, just me by myself. And now in writing, it's a solo process, right? And but the heart of it is still exactly what I did before. I'm improvising my story in my head and putting it on paper. That's what it is.
But now you've got to deal with a publisher.
We're sitting out there in Hightown, and an editor and everybody else. But yeah, but that's good because you have to. I learned from, again, from working in theatre, you write a script and you hand it over and different people read it and they will read it and it suddenly becomes something else. And what you think you wrote is not what they think you wrote, they change it. So that the idea that what you write may not say exactly what you think it says is not alien to me. I know that. So having an editor and having someone who will read it and give me feedback and say, are you sure that that's what you meant, is incredibly valuable. I don't know what I'd do without an editor, actually. I trust my first readers and my editor implicitly to give me feedback and to say what is working, what is not working.
Do you get restless with the time delay from when you've turned it over to them and when it finally comes out here on the stage?
Well, it's actually, that's one of the things that I find really odd. I mean, I had no idea how the book industry worked. And it's a much slower process than it is. I mean, theatre, basically, you have your big opening, bang, bang, and you do it. And then 3 weeks later, you close and it's gone, right? And it's over. And in this business, a book lasts a lot longer, right? I mean, and We Shall Have Snow has been around for 2 years now, and it's still alive, it's still going. And that is really odd to me. These events come and go, but it's not a beginning, it's not an end, it's something along the path. And that's very, very different.
But I don't want you to say you're expecting more rain. You want this rain to stay, but you don't want more to fall here.
I don't want more, but it's actually interesting that these books are actually seasonal. That the first book I wrote, And We Shall Have Snow's winter, and then the second one I wrote was set in October, so it was fall. And this one's a spring one. This one's, and it's really funny that it came out just exactly when the kind of weather that I was writing about actually happened. It really happened. So, I mean, it starts off with drowned fields and ice and snow and really bad weather in a late spring. And it just happened that by the time it published, it was exactly that.
I think there's another question here.
Yeah.
How long does it take you to write a book? Like like you said, it was a slow process. How long does it take?
The actual writing? I do a first draft, then about 7 or 8 months. Then it takes about a year to get to the point where I really want it to be submitted. And then after that, it comes together. I mean, it's come together really fast. I think because we know the books now, that we work pretty fast on getting it all together.
Thank you.
Yes.
Do you always know the end when you start?
No, I don't. I have no idea.
Sorry, Ray. For the benefit of those watching at home, the question was, do you always know the end when you start?
Oh, no, I don't. I'm what they call a pantser. Crime writers are described as plotters or pantsers. So there's crime writers that will sit down, do post-it notes all over a wall and know exactly where the story is going before they sit down and write, and they write it, right? I don't. I have the other process. I basically start off with, if I know where it is and I know where the body is and I've got some idea of who the body is, then I can start. And I make it up as I go, and I don't know quite often until fairly late on who actually did it. It's. I think that's what kind of keeps me going. If the book is keeping me interested and trying to figure out what's going on, then hopefully it's going to keep a reader hopefully going on. But yeah, no, I don't know. I thought I knew. In the second book, I thought I knew by about chapter 7, and then I changed my mind. And this one, I kind of knew fairly early on, but then I changed it. I changed the ending. Yeah.
But you did give us some foreshadowing fairly early on for each of the murders.
Yeah, but I go back, right? When I get to the end and I know who the murderer is, I go back and put them in. I put the clues in.
Okay,
Yeah, I make sure the clues
okay.
in. Yeah.
Now, are you putting clues in the computer now?
No, I'm actually, the fourth Roxanne book is going to be a summer book. And because I've just done a big move and my life's been a fairly big upheaval between January and now. So it's kind of 4 chapters in and yeah.
But Izzy could move to Robson during the summer.
Izzy is around.
And what about the Lakeshore Art Group? Were they around?
They're always around. They're always around.
Are there any other questions, folks? Yes, please.
You talk about your characters and dialogue. How do you situate your characters and dialogue within your scenery, in your community? How do you balance that and how do you plan that?
How do you situate your characters and dialogue within the community? How do you balance that?
It happens quite naturally. It's really funny. I just, it's that business of I need to have a strong sense of place. So if I know that they're sitting, for instance, in the first book, there's an awful lot, there's a lot of sitting around. It was actually based, the book club in the first one was based a lot on a book club that Nancy and I both belonged to. And we'd get together and we'd sit around the table and eat a lot of food and talk. And so that was based on that. So I kind of had a sense of how that conversation would work. And if I could, again, I think it comes from improvising a lot. If you know where you are, if you know where you are and if you know where you are and who they are, you can make, then what happens, the hat follows. So you can make it work that way. So it's just that kind of improvising is in your head. I have to hear them in my head. That sounds really weird. It's a very intuitive process. It's not, I don't plan it. I will start to think about it and they will start telling me where they're going, and quite often they will surprise me. And it's when they do that I actually do the best writing. I'll go for a walk and suddenly I'm thinking about one of the characters, and suddenly there's a conversation going on in my head, and then suddenly this character is telling me things that I didn't expect.
Is that how come you found the second body?
The second
You went for a walk?
I don't want to do a spoiler here.
Well, you didn't need to. They're hooked now to find out who the second body was.
I can't know that quite often the bodies I know I have to know the place. I have to know the place for the bodies. I think about the place for the bodies.
Ladies and gentlemen, are there any other questions? Yes, sir.
Do you encounter any issues with the time delay between the editor and the writer?
I haven't. I'm very lucky with my editor, and he's very, very sound and very tactful in how he tells me things. My readers are too. My readers are great at being able to tell me without hurting my feelings or anything like that. They will very firmly but very gently tell me that what they think is maybe not quite right. And there's just things I just need to be. We occasionally rubbish that. Because I'm British, I have a tendency to want to use British spelling. And occasionally we run into a kind of wrestling match about that, but that's not happening very often.
We have 3 wonderful titles. I can vouch for them. I know that they've circulated well at our building. And we shall have snow. Yes, sooner or later in Manitoba we will, but in the meantime, enjoy it because it's really a delightful mystery. And then is heard no more. I'd like you to figure out, if you can, where did that quote come from? Because it is a famous piece of literature. And then we have today's wonderful piece, Down Came the Rain. You remember what happened? She ran along that breakwater, and she had to jump in the water in the middle of the rain to get away from that truck. Like, what was happening there? Please enjoy the books. Roxanne? No, Raye. I don't know if I'm ever going to stop calling you that now. John is going to take Raye away, and she's going to get ready to sign the books for you. So it'll just be a minute or two. Where are you, John?
Oh, I'm right over here. And just before we head off to the signing, I wanted to thank all you folks once again for joining us here in the space. Many thanks to all those watching on YouTube. The video will remain live, so if you'd like to share it with anyone who didn't have a chance to join us or would just like to rewatch it, please do feel free. Though the chat was a little quiet tonight, Raye, I will say there was somebody you may know named Fiona who did say, "Hello, Mom."
Wonderful.
And I'd like to ask all of you to join me in thanking both Raye Anderson, the author this evening, and of course, Gerald Brown, your host for tonight. Thank you all so very much for joining us.
I'll say one more thing. I never realized when I did books, how many people it takes to make a book. And I have learned, so, I mean, the publisher, Ashley, who does you know, the booksellers, the printers, the copywriters, everybody who is involved in it, there's a whole army of people that it takes to make a book. So I just wanted to shout out to everybody that's involved in it, because without them, we wouldn't be reading the books.
And one of the people that you didn't mention is the person who did the illustrations. And the challenge for you is to find out where in the book each of these illustrations come from, because they really are delightfully well done, both front and back. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.